Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for letting me spend some time with you. It is greatly appreciated. Just a friendly reminder to hit all the buttons, the ones you hit, right? Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Yeah, all that stuff. Makes it easier for people to find us just like you did. Also, before I forget and I start getting messages, books are available at authorjerrymitchell.com, or you can go to givegod90.com, follow the links from there. Now that the advertisements are out of the way, there we go. I gotta stop and say this because, well, you just got to, right? Just a short, very short tribute for Dolly Parton, who passed away yesterday at age 80. She will be greatly missed. She is, in my mind, one of the two greatest female entertainers in country music of all times. Dolly's been around a long time. A lot of people don't know this. She grew up about an hour from where we currently live. And yes, this area is in deep, deep mourning. More importantly, though, she had an ability to do something not a lot of people do. Her songs often, and maybe not often, but she had a talent for taking biblical principles and putting them to music. Coat of Many Colors is one. Daddy Was an Old-Time Preacher Man is another. And millions of people heard that, and they received, whether they knew they were receiving a short Bible lesson or not, I don't know, but they were. She will be greatly missed, and there's very few people in the world that you have trouble finding something bad to say about, and she's one of them. And I know that some of that might come out. I hope not. I hope people are showing enough grace and enough love that they let her memory be one of just something fantastic. She gave so much to the area. She gave so much to people. A lot of people know how much of a philanthropist she was. She would spend a lot of her money to do things like giving books to needy children. What a lot of people don't know is if she kind of got to know you a little bit, and I've talked to people who know her personally or knew her personally, and all of them have said, if you needed something and she thought she could help, she'd make a phone call and get you an audition. She would get you an interview. She would put herself out for you. She would spend her time for you. And that, for some of these people, meant a lot more than any of the money that, just taking that couple minutes to make a phone call. Hey, can you see this person? I think they really deserve a shot at this. The rest was up to them. They weren't riding on her coattails. She got you in the door, but the rest was up to you. So some of those people became very well liked in the area. Now, on to what we're looking at today. All right. Over the past few episodes, I have been talking about reasons why people think they can't understand the Bible, why they think it's confusing, why they don't grasp some of the concepts there. And I've looked at the philosophy versus the reality issues, how it's made it really difficult. I talk a lot about language and translation, how that can sometimes make it look confused or seem confusing. And today I want to think about something a little different. The images that we have in our minds as we're reading. Okay? You know where I'm going with this, right? we are looking at something, or we're reading something, and we have a picture in our minds of what we think it should look like. And when the words don't fit our picture, we get confused. Look at Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "Meanwhile, Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God." Should be fairly familiar, I hope. If you're familiar with Moses, you know that verse. It's right before, it's where he met God at the burning bush. Well, the pictures we have of the land of Midian today make it look kind of barren. It's kind of almost a desert landscape, right? And we wonder, why would Moses take livestock there? There's nothing for him to eat. It was sparse. It was, they'd walk more than they'd waste more energy walking than eating. There just wouldn't be anything for them there. And when you're caring for a flock, especially if you're raising lambs or kids or calves, if those calves, if that mother's not eating enough for that calf to gain properly, you're not going to have a flock. It's just that simple. So just like the land of Midian, or just like the rest of the world, the land of Midian has changed a lot in the last 3,500 years. That's when Moses was walking those lands. There's been earthquakes, there's been storms, right? There's been changes in the weather. Weather patterns change. We're sort of going through one now, right? Not just, summer to fall either. Weather patterns change worldwide every so often. Now, according to articles published in National Geographic as well as from the BBC, at the time Moses would have been alive, the land of Midian would have been a major grassland. Okay? There would have been ample food for sheep, goats, cattle, whatever. But we look at it and we see, oh man, why would anybody want to go there? Why would anybody want to live there? There's nothing there in our modern minds, right? That's not how it was 3,500 years ago. I want you to think for a second, would our Creator send his chosen people, the people that are his special treasure, right? Would he send them to a place where there's no grass for their animals, no minerals for them to mine for what they needed, nothing to survive? I mean, they're going to need wood for cooking, for heat, for the furnaces to smelt the fire down, or smelt the gold down, the ore down to get the gold, I should say. When they were doing things for the tabernacle. And all of that would have been readily available around Midian at the time of Moses. So, when we think about putting what we think we know onto the pages of what we're reading, sometimes it gets confusing. And the next thing I'm going to look at might surprise you just a little bit. And it comes from 2 Kings 10:1. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders and the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, and he goes on, I don't need to go on about that because what I want to look at are the 70 sons. And a lot of people think, how many wives would Ahab need to get 70 sons? That's our modern concept, our modern way of thinking about this. But that's kind of wrong, and what I'm going to say might surprise you. The way we're trained to think about these things may not have been the best way to train us to think about these things, okay? And it might sound good at first but as you're kind of jumping in, but then you think, wait a minute. Just like the land of Midian, am I imposing my modern concepts, my modern ideas on historical times? Well, yes, we are. Because the word, the word sons, doesn't always mean direct son. Sometimes it can be a grandson. Okay, it can include servants who are so faithful they are considered part of the family. It can mean someone completely unrelated that Ahab would have considered them family. He would have treated them just like his own son. Looking back, when I was young, there were a couple of families that we knew, and they treated me just like one of their own. And even today, our granddaughter has a couple of families that welcome her in with open arms. They treat her just like their own daughter. And I imagine that many of you who are listening, you might have a similar situation. You either, have someone that, you just consider them like family. You do almost anything for them, and hopefully they would do almost anything for you, right? But there are people that you treat like family. And that's what we're looking at in that verse. It's not, if we start thinking about, how many wives did Ahab need to give him 70 sons? It's kind of a little silly when we ask that question, if you really stop and think about it. Because along with 70 sons, how many daughters were there going to be? Right? And when you put it in those terms, and then yes, I'm poking a little fun at some things here. Because when you put it in those terms, Ahab would have been so busy making babies, would he have any time to be king? Think about that. So when we attempt to put our modern way of thinking about things, our modern way of looking at things, our modern way of seeing things into or onto a historical event, it's going to be confusing. And here's the point. We should avoid reading history with a modern point of view. It's kind of like being a Monday morning quarterback. For folks in the other nations that listen to this, it's like, I don't know what you call it. I don't know how to put it in soccer terms, but it's kind of like second guessing the coach's call on a game, right? Looking back in time and saying, well, they should have done this. They should have done that. This should have been done different. That should have been done different. Well, quite often when something like that happens, what was done during the game was done for a reason. It's done with purpose. What happens in history was probably done with reason, with purpose. And we're trying to second guess it from our modern point of view, our Monday morning point of view after the Saturday or Sunday game. You see, when we include language, culture, and history all together, it gives us context. When we stop attempting to impose our modern images that we have in our heads onto the words that are written, it can be confusing. It really can. And what makes it worse is we have now these artist renderings, we have TV shows, we have movies that paint a picture for you. And what we should do, or what we should try to do, what we should strive to do, is to let the words in the Bible paint the picture for you. You see, those words are there. They're there for you, but you have to be willing to see the picture that is there and not maintain that picture in your mind of what you think it should look like. And that is what I want you to think about until next time. Because you can understand the Bible if you're willing, but you have to be willing. So until next time, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.